All right, so I'm going to get started with introductions. So, as you are grabbing your things, we'll ask that you kind of tone down the conversations a bit. And our first session today is going to be Black Joy in the Arts. Our panelists include Wisdom Nemi Otikor, a graduate student at Texas State University pursuing a Master of Fine Arts. Wisdom holds a postgraduate degree in education from the University of Lagos and has taught English and literature at Success Group of Schools, has served as a Sustainable Development Goals Project Coordinator for the United Nations, is a creative writing teacher in Lagos, and an instructional assistant in U.S. literature at Texas State. Our second panelist is Joseph Ambrosino, who is an undergraduate student here at USF in the Honors College at the University of South Florida, studying political science and history with a minor in psychology. Joseph has a strong interest in the connections between African American history and mental health. In 2023, he was selected as a recipient of a Fulbright scholarship to study Black humanities at the University of Bristol. He has created USF's first Black Wellness Club, a student organization dedicated to bridging psychological concepts and research into the Black experience in America. As a recipient of the Summer for Undergraduates program at the Florida State University College of Law, he is also a great honor student, and we're excited to have an undergraduate researcher on the panel here today. Finally, Dr. Cheryl Rodriguez is professor of Africana Studies and Anthropology in the School of Interdisciplinary Global Studies at the University of South Florida. Her research interests include race, gender, class, and housing policy, histories of local communities, Black women's community activism, and Afro-Cuban women's history. Dr. Rodriguez is currently principal investigator of an NSF-funded project on racial violence in Florida. Her publications include 2 co-edited volumes, Transatlantic Feminisms, Women and Gender Studies in Africa and the Diaspora, and The Power and Freedom of Black Feminist and Womanist Pedagogy, co-edited with the late Gary Lemons. At the 2023 meeting of the American Anthropological Association, Professor Rodriguez was also awarded the Dr. Ira Harrison Legacy Award by the Association of Black Anthropologists, and she is the former director for the Institute on Black Life. Each panelist will speak for about 15 minutes, after which we will open the room to discussion, including questions and answers. Please join me in welcoming the panelists to the dais.
It's afternoon already. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to say before I start that I feel so blessed and just so blessed to be here, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity. Thank you so much. I I am right now a student in Texas State University, but I am Nigerian. So my paper is actually going to look at. I just moved to the US, which is barely 6 months ago, and it's kind of a whole lot of learning experience for me. This is the first time being in a country like the US. Well, please, my classmates would think, my classmates think I'm not a fan of the US. I don't know if I am, but I do love the opportunities I actually find here. If I had a choice, I wouldn't be here, though. I think the US is really arrogant, and I really don't understand why, but I get why. But, but I'm here, and I guess I'm here to stay. But being in the US has actually taught me a whole lot of things, and it's so beautiful, all I have to learn. And so my paper generally looks at just this identity I've just come to realize just by being here as a black person, which I never saw myself as when I was in Nigeria, and how it has come to shaping what I write as a poet and just generally how I see myself. I will start by my history as where I come from, and I'll go dive to my experience in Texas State, which is the only place I've been since I came to the US, and this is the first time I'm living in Texas State. So yeah. My paper would actually go like this. So I'll just start. On August, so before I start, my paper is actually going to look at is a combination of poetry and photography and just a little story. It's mostly just story, poems, and pictures you would actually see there on the screen. On August 21st, 2024 was the day I came to the US. I arrived at George Bush International Airport in Austin. This was the first time I would be in a place as multiracial as this. Hopeful, enthusiastic, an anxious dress and a black shirt, black pair of trousers, and a colorful feel-out gifted to me by my best friend. I walked through the queue, half happy to be here and half irritated by the long queue towards the border security. It was annoying. I was fascinated by the different shades, but it became clear to me about the ordering of my identity as back in Nigeria. In Nigeria, I am Nemi, which is my name. I'm a Bolo, that's like my tribe. I'm from River State, I'm a teacher, I'm Nigerian. But this ordering would actually change as I go to the US because in the new environment, I was no longer just Nemi, but I was Nemi, then black. Before you see me as a Nigerian when I open my mouth to speak with my accent, which I'm very proud of, by the way, and then a student. This marked the beginning of a self-awareness that has persisted with me since then. A recognition that my migration to the United States would lead to the reshuffling of my identity and a reinterpretation of the semiotic science tied to how I position myself and how others perceive me. Now, this realization became even more obvious on my first day on campus at San Marcos, Texas, a city whose racial demography as at July 1st, 2024, according to the US Census Bureau, showed a percentage of 5.6% black individuals compared to 63.3% white individuals. This means that for every black person you see, there are approximately 11.3 white people. As time went by and I became more comfortable at school, I understood that there was a new ordering of my identity. I realized that in America, my skin color and accent are the first markers of my identity, which often influence how people position me in interactions. When Americans hear me speak, my accent clearly indicates that I am not from the United States, leading to the common question, where are you originally from? I take pride in responding Nigeria. All of you know how arrogant Nigerians can be. This often leads to the broader conversation about my identity, in which I may then highlight such aspects as my ethnicity and nationality, among others, which usually are for granted in the Nigerian context. In these broader conversations, I have come to discover how most Americans I've met do not know much about geography, especially as it relates to the American continent. In encountering my identity in the US, I have come to a constant responsibility to educate people I meet that lions do not walk on the streets of Africa, that the children of Africa are not all dying of hunger, and that some of us speak English, good English, and can easily differentiate between American and British English, and that Africa is not a country, it's a continent. There's something mortifying about American ignorance, and it's arrogance. On days when I am rattled about not knowing something in class, I console myself with the knowledge that Americans don't know so much about my country, so what the fuck, sorry, do I have to bother myself about learning so much about them? Nigeria is home. My father is Obolo, while my mother is a Quaker. Both are minority tribes in River State, Nigeria. Growing up in a house of just boys, there was no division of gender roles. At 8, I knew how to clean the house, how to make food. I could cook anything I want to cook. My mother would always make mouths and proud about the fact that she was training us so we don't get to pick wives based on how homely they are, what they can cook, but on some other things based on beliefs. The only time I had an argument about my mom when it had to do with gender was when I told her I wanted to be a literature teacher. I'd encountered writers like J.P. Clark, Gabriel Okara, Derek Walcott, Wole Soyinka, Chris Okibo, Shakespeare, and I've fallen in love with poetry and fiction and the way words came to life on the paper. She was worried about how a man could raise a family with the meager salary of a Nigerian teacher. You see, my father was a teacher. So firsthand, my mom had actually experienced what it meant to raise a family as a man and with a teacher's salary. It was an argument. However, I persisted until she agreed to a certain compromise. Now, this is not about the compromise, but she agreed. So after a bachelor's degree in English and literature, a postgraduate degree, diploma in education, I had a 7-year career teaching creative writing, and I decided to get an MFA in poetry. Hence, I came to the US. Um, now, before the 7 years career, I tried all the careers to please my mom. One of such is I worked in a multinational company that made and distributed gas generators where I worked in marketing communications. Now, this is to say that I encountered several expatriates, Americans, British, Germans, and so many other countries. This is to say that I have actually encountered different races and different continents, contexts, but more especially, I've also encountered white privilege. Now, the white privilege I encountered in my country, in my country, is slightly different from what I've seen here since I came to the US. 3. My first poem. To the white American boys who ask if we speak English in Nigeria, yes, we do. And I will not say that I like it or I want it. But like everything that the Queen brought to us, it is a two-edged sword, a facade, a politics of trade, of theft, a renaming of history, of semantics, of language, of people, of places. And Adam named the animals. And the Queen, she does love our colonies. Do you see how narrative becomes truth? You tell a story over and over and over, and it becomes a truth. How language is formed. First an idea, then a sound, a rhythm, a people, a retelling. Forgive me for the transgression, Lord. When the Bible found my people, we are taught to not question God's word as truth. And my people became a question mark. When you ask me if we speak English in Nigeria, like your language is prized, the second coming of the Lord, how I have waited to have your language wrapped in my tongue like my lover's kisses, an oasis. I am endangered. Oh Lord, do not forgive this transgression. When you asked me, do you speak English in Nigeria? Voice clinical, an American, noun, ignorance. I want to say to you, we speak Obolo, the language of my father, and Okrika, the language with which my grandmother sang lullabies, and Obolo, and Yoruba, my lover's language, and Asusuibo, and Hausa, and Efik, and Urobo, and Ijon, and Pidgin, and sound, with sound, and sign, with rhythm, without. Blackness encounters me. Now, this is how I discovered the whole identity as black. I've almost never found myself, seen myself as black, as I stated earlier. But since I moved to the US, I've actually seen that. But now, in understanding the multiracial construct that is America, I have come to understand that race is a huge factor in America, and that by my skin color, I am black. Janice Gassam Arese, in the article, Why Does Everything Have to Do About Race?, answered the question about race and its impact in America, when she said that racism is embedded into every facet and crevice of America. Hence, there is a need for someone, even a legal immigrant like me, to be part of this construct. The United States Census Bureau, in recognizing the 6 racial categories for statistic purposes, identifies black or African American as the same category. There again, in thinking about the box to tick as regard race, this is my choice. Furthermore, in an episode of Bob Hat Tabisla, an American sitcom about a middle-aged white man who falls in love with a Nigerian woman, while speaking on sameness between the Africans and the African American, Gloria, one of the actors, said, all you Africans think you're better than us. You think white folks see a difference between us? To them, we all look the same. You get pulled up by the cops, he's just going to see this. Now, she said this by pointing to her skin color and meaning the skin. Now, this is not to say that we are the same. Of course, we are not. We've had different things historically and individually. What makes African Americans and what makes Africans different? A whole lot. However, when we talk about sameness, we are not talking about sameness as regards history or geography. We are talking about sameness as per the skin color and or shade and the perception of white America. Because when we think about history, while Africans had colonization, African Americans had slavery, while Africans, and especially Nigerians, have actually had to deal with neocolonialism and corruption. African Americans have had to African Americans have had to fight for their place on the table that is America, as Landry Hughes in iTunes calls it. And there is no comparison. However, we are the same. And following this, I know that I am black, and I accepted it. However, in, in all of these encounters, I also encountered the negativity of being black or being seen as black. Sometime in September 2024, while I was taking a walk down West Avenue, down Oil Mill in San Marcos, Texas State, some white boys while driving by shouted nigger from their car at me. Nigger. Merriam-Webster defines it as offensive, used as an insulting or contentious term for a black person. It was the first time somebody will refer to me as that. It was surprising. It was funny. I wondered what they meant and who they were talking to. Nigger. Ranks is almost certainly the most offensive and inflammatory racial slur in English, a term expressive of hatred and bigotry. That is Merriam-Webster. That's not my word, but it so captures what I think about it. Did they mean it as a slur or some kind of reference to another bro? Were they drunk or just plain ignorant? When I got home and spoke to my Nigerian roommate, he advised me to not take such walks again. When I spoke to my mom, her response was, I've already lost a son, I will not lose another. Stay in your house, knowing your background fully well. Now, this simply means that you know where you come from, you don't have anybody there. A few days after, there was an email notifying students that about slurs being painted on a student's car. The email said, the student came back to find the N-word keyed onto the trunk of his car and scratches on the vehicle's right door. The N-word, such euphemism. As I talked to my friend who is a white girl about this, I also told her about my experience, and she was visibly irritated and called the boys cowards. Again, I laughed. Of how serious she took this, I commented that such slurs don't have any effect on Nigerians. As I analyzed that incident and my reaction, I realized that in coping with this experience, as I coped with this experience as I cope with being Nigerian, how Nigerians cope with suffering. We make a joke about it. We say it is well, it is well, it is well, and we go about our life like nothing happened. These are a few things I actually experienced, just what made me understand that. Because of time, I will just go straight now. Now, in encountering the fact that, and accepting the fact that I am black, however, by being in the United States of America, a multinational, multiracial country, I'm in a sociocultural context where beyond blackness, being a racial marker, it comes with a certain perception or profile. So in encountering my blackness in America, I've encountered racial profiling, racial slurring, and the fetishization of the black man. Now, in looking for safe spaces, I discovered, in looking for safe spaces, I discovered that sometimes home is a familiarity, familiar food, familiar voices, familiar activities. Sometimes none of these familiarities suffices, especially as an immigrant. I teach myself joy in these times. In searching for a safe space, I found joy in poetry, in experiences, learning new things, laughing loudly sometimes to myself, the very little things. And finally, now making space for joy. I'll just read that as it is here, so I just leave here. Now, I do not like to write about politics, but this is probably because politics reminds me of how humans, if given the power, will be their own apocalypse. But just being here and how political America is, I've discovered that something that Shante Joseph said, and she said, black people and how they choose to control their bodies has always been a political matter. So I've discovered that I write a whole lot right now about I write poems about blackness, whether it is beautiful and the days it's not beautiful. But most times my poems are either a celebration or sometimes they're not. But they're never a defeat. And I discovered something that Gambian-born immigrant mother strikes me, said, being black is my biggest flex. And it is. And so I discovered that because this is the only way I know how to, I perceive my black identity the same way I perceive my Nigerian, as a bold and brave statement, as permission to be, as permission to exist fully, to take up space, to be unapologetic about my existence and laugh loudly and sometimes This laughter could actually be construed as lewdness. Yet I do not care. Shanti Joseph said this: joy doesn't have to be organized. Sorry. Joy doesn't have to be organized. It could be random, sporadic, and scrappy. My black joy is accepting this beautiful body, its color, and its history stitched intricately to its blackness. My black joy is a resistance to hate and prejudice. My black joy is Afrobeat and sleep and pepper and laughter and homesickness and poetry. And finally, this world is a snowstorm, and black joy is fire, a conjuring, stone by stone, history is scanned, black bodies are hieroglyphics, frame by frame, hashtag and after hashtag, and black is. I am. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Let me say that one more time. Good afternoon. I'm so unbelievably humbled to be here. Like, looking at everybody right now and seeing the smiles on people's faces, just enjoying and honoring the legacies of Black artists today. It's humbling. It's an honor. And I'm so happy to just see everybody today. I'm so happy to be alongside such wonderful panelists, and I'm so happy to be able to present today. I was already introduced, but I want to introduce myself again. My name is Joseph Ambrosino. I'm a senior majoring in political science and history, minoring in psychology. I'm the co-editor-in-chief of the literary magazine here on campus called Thread Magazine. I'm obviously the founder of Black Wellness Club here. I'm an RA, so I see some people from Res Ed in the back. Shout out, shout out Kosov. It was a short walk here. I was like, came here at like 10:35. I was like, over there. But today I'll be talking about my thesis project that I did last year with Dr. Cheryl Rodriguez. Thank you so much for the help with that. Shout out. Talking about exploring the Harlem Renaissance and Black arts movement. And really this project for me is just kind of like an excuse to talk about some of my favorite artists in general, right? Because it is a great joy to do that. It's an honor to do that. So without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and get started. So it's going to be like kind of quick, just a great history run here. Oh. All right, there we go. So why study art history through a critical lens? And my main thesis of this is that art history itself in Western nations is historically tied to upholding white supremacy in the built environment. It's manifesting it. It's spreading ideas of white supremacy. So when we think about it, monumentalization plays a severe role in this. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more on the next slide, but places like Stone Mountain, Georgia, where the largest monument, or one of the largest monuments in the South, is directly tied to the Confederacy. It's tied to people trying to keep people in bondage, and we're honoring these people. But it also goes to the other side of people that we honor and see as heroes. Talk about Mount Rushmore, where Thomas Jefferson. There's a great deal of history with Monticello and how brutal the slavery conditions were in Monticello. It's also spread through harmful stereotypes in film and media, right? Just before the Harlem Renaissance really started to get going, The Birth of Nations was released, or The Birth of a Nation was released, and was played in Woodrow Wilson's White House, right? And displayed us, the Black community, African Americans, as monsters, right? It was basically a sanctioned film screening of a lynching. So this is commonplace, and we can talk about the history of how Black women are depicted in film and media, the harmful stereotypes surrounding that, how Black men are depicted in film and media. So anti-Black ideas themselves, they're not static to the past. They're an ever-present feature of contemporary society. And I want to talk a little bit about some of my personal experiences with that. So, like Dr. Pond mentioned, I was lucky enough to receive the Fulbright Scholarship to the United Kingdom 2 summers ago now. And one of the first days, we went on a walking tour with Dr. Elizabeth Rovels. And I got to walk around the city, visit these cultural sites. And right across from where Edward Colston, one of the main contributors of Bristol, he was a slaver. A lot of his money came from the slave trade. He sold 64,000 people into slavery and basically built the city of Bristol as it is today. In 2020, his statue was toppled, and we just saw the platform that he was on. Right across from that is Perrow's Bridge. And Perrow was a slave in Bristol, right? And so in Perros Bridge, you wouldn't even know that it was dedicated to this person. This person committed suicide right after he was released from slavery because of the trauma and the horrors that he saw. Um, and when I visited it, you wouldn't be able to tell. The plaque that was dedicated to him was about a block away. It was dusty. It was ignored, right? And that's a common theme throughout African history and throughout the Black diasporic history around the globe, is that we honor those who subjugated us, but we celebrate, or we ignore the actual true histories of slavery, of racism, of the brutality that Africans around the world face. And all I can think about staring into the water beyond Perros Bridge was the color red. I thought about the people who chose to jump from the slave ships rather than live their life in bondage. So it was a powerful spiritual moment. And I think about 10 years earlier, when I was 9 years old, and I want to kind of point to where I am right now. So there's me in the little beanie. Yeah, there's a little joke. I'm also sitting on this, I guess, Mrs. Club? I'm not sure what it's princess lady? But I was 9 years old, and our family planned this trip to go see the largest Confederate monument nation, Stone Mountain, Georgia. And all I could remember was ice cream, playing around with, I'm also one of 5 boys, I'm also a house of boys as well, playing with my brothers in artificial snow. I remember seeing Santa Claus, and I remember just this general sense of celebration, right? I'm one of the largest public art infrastructures celebrating slavers. And I see this, this panel that I saw. It talks about Christmas in the slave cabins, right? And it describes it as a time of celebration for the slaves, as a time of easygoingness, right? A distortion of the history of slavery in real time connected to this large-scale public infrastructure project. Oh, other way. So, to say the least, we have problems with art and public memory. How can we begin to reconcile the historic suffering of Black and African American people when we simultaneously celebrate it in public art? And with my project, one possible solution to this is to employ alternative narratives to history, alternative Black history. We want to empower alternative narratives through Black artists. This way, we begin to celebrate and honor those who actively fought against these systems of thinking instead of empowering those who chose to enslave others. So with my thesis, the Harlem Renaissance and Black arts movement are rich with examples of this. So my main claim throughout the paper is that Black artists reflected on and expressed historical oppressive events. And by studying this through this lens of critical art history, a relatively new field of research, but that ties critical race theory into art history, by recognizing that people are born with inherent disadvantages or advantages based off the society that they live in, how that's displayed or commented on through art is very, very important through understanding American history. Studying Black arts movements, right, which I define as a deliberate effort from African Americans artists to create art that comments on, displays, or arises against cultural conditions within the Black community, is a form of critical art history that deserves to be uplifted. So 2 of the more effective Black art movements that I study in this is, of course, the Harlem Renaissance and the Black arts movement. So a little bit behind the Harlem Renaissance is that it wasn't just confined to Harlem, right? It's commonly known as this burst of Black creativity in central Manhattan when millions upon millions of people were in a mass migration known as the Great Migration from southern cities such as Atlanta, Georgia, Florida, into northern cities. And it's commonly known that it was just New York. That is not true. It was a diverse mix of cultures, talents, and perspective in Boston, LA, Baltimore, Chicago, Milwaukee, a lot of northern cities besides just New York City. And this is described more frequently by W.E.B. Du Bois, Alvin Locke, as more of a global movement. They called it originally the Negro Renaissance rather than the Harlem Renaissance to empower this kind of global standing of what was happening. These kindred centers of African Americans who were in place and empowered to make art, to have pride in their culture. So we already talked a little bit about Jacob Lawrence in an earlier presentation, but a little bit more about him. He was born in Atlantic City, New Jersey in 1917, but raised in the age age of 13 in Harlem, describing himself as a child of the Renaissance. He was focused on peoples most affected by the Great Migration in the Migration series, a portrait of those people, a mirror into the realities of many African Americans at the time. He detailed the harsh realities and honestly the small joys of the life that many African Americans faced during the time. We see in this panel, they're at church. And church at the time was one of the small places where people can find hope, where people can find peace, right? This is a gathering where people can hope for a brighter day. And these places were essential into the building blocks of what was to come. We also have folks like Josephine Baker. And if you don't know about Josephine Baker, she was truly the Renaissance person at the time. She did a lot. She was born in 1906 in Mississippi to entertain her parents and moved to New York at the age of 15. She took the traditions of African-American song and dance across Europe, particularly in France, where she had an illustrious career abroad in both entertainment and also in the military, where she served as an undercover agent for France when Nazi Germany was taking over. Right? She served behind the lines and was honored through that. She actually renounced her American citizenship and chose her French citizenship in the decades to come as well, but would also travel back to the United States to perform. And when she was refused to perform in segregated theater venues, she would employ tactics from the NAACP and actually protest with that and intentionally go into these places to perform. We also have the filmmaker, the media specialist, the photographer that is Gordon Parks. He was born into poverty and segregation in Kansas in 1912. He was self-taught. He pursued photography himself, professionally receiving the Julius Rosewald Fellowship in 1942, where he received that formal training. And after multiple government projects, he was eventually appointed through places like Life magazine, where he would show the harsh realities, the true realities of African-American people across the Renaissance, across the same time period of the 20s, 30s, and 40s, where people in the aftermath of the Great Migration were still experiencing poverty, were a little bit disappointed about the economic opportunities at the time, right? There was still discrimination in the North just as much as there was in the South. So we have this picture of this young boy in Harlem just playing in the sprayer, right? Just that authentic reality that Gordon Parks was really, truly about. This also transitions into later movements, such as the Black Arts Movement, where because of the rise of the Civil Rights Movement, because of that disappointment that many African Americans felt, they took to the streets. Right? Throughout the 50s and 60s, up until the early 70s, people had this very militant approach about their identity. Right? It took a nationalistic turn. And so with the death of people like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, this turned on many people to this new sense of, okay, we have to fight for our rights in a more militant way ever than before. So this took a turn in the art struggle as well with the Black Arts Movement. So two people that I wanted to highlight here are Amiri Baraka and Gil Scott-Heron. Amiri Baraka was born Leroy Jones, but in 1965, after Malcolm X's death, he moved from the Lower East Side for Harlem. And Amiri means prince, and Baraka means of the divine blessing. Here he started the Black Arts Repertoire Theater, a keystone in the Black Arts Movement, and Baraka himself kind of coined Malcolm X as this fire prophet, right, that people need to turn to in order to find that inspiration, that growth and nationalism, in order to employ art as that central device for progress. So Baraka's poetry itself, he was politically galvanizing. He was very controversial for the time, and I want to talk about one specific example that kind of touches on that. He incorporated hyperbole and a militant villainization of American whites at the time in order to galvanize people for a sense of revolution. And one of the more controversial pieces was Black Dada Nihilismus in 1964, where he basically calls for the literal violence for revolution, right? But it's an interesting kind of setup there because Dada means nothing, and nihilism, nihilismus, he's basically saying that although he's claiming for violence, this eventually does not matter, right? A lot of this stuff that he's saying, it won't be heard. So he's trying to rally people amongst African Americans in order to gain that controversial attention anyway. Gil Scott-Heron takes a similar approach as well. He's often known as the godfather of hip hop. He took a similar approach to jazz poetry. And with the album, and this is one of my favorite albums ever, it's a New Black Poet, Small Talk on 125th and Lenox, released in 1970, where he has tracks like Comet Number One, he has tracks like Enough, he has tracks like The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. Tracks that were, and still to this day, continue to be galvanizing, continue to be central themes around current protest movements. He also has this famous poem called His Story, where he performed it on television as well in 1982, where he talks about kind of the role that African history itself plays into this kind of white supremacist narrative about black people, how places like Egypt, which is on the African continent, is now identified and moved into places like the Middle East. It removes the African nature of Egypt, or powerful cultural centers like that. Scott-Heron overall developed this sense of urgency. He had this overtly sense of black nationalism, of the cool. He employed jazz, he employed funk into telling this story as well. So when we talk about the significance today, we have to understand that the convictions, aesthetics, influenced 80s and 90s hip-hop, creating a space for cultural expression, reflecting the anger and urban frustrations, such as Amiri Baraka and Gil Scott-Heron, but also the joy, hope, and resiliency with artists like Jacob Lawrence, Josephine Baker, and Gordon Parks. So in a way, these artists were cultural pioneers. They were the reason why we have people like NWA, a Tupac Shakur, a KRS-One, a Kendrick Lamar to this day, where people still quote, the revolution will not be televised. Lauryn Hill, folks like that who continue to carry on this message of black militancy, black nationalism, and an anti-white supremacist narrative in their music and their art. So that is my thesis, but I kind of wanted to end off with a direct inspiration from all of these artists, because Gil Scott-Heron himself was an immense inspiration for me. In addition to kind of doing research, I'm also a poet, and I wanted to end off with this poem that was published into one of the student magazines here. It's called Agape. And to my son, yet to be born, I can hear you with a gentle voice, kind enough to silence broken hearts and soft enough to ease my worry. You will ask me, and what of the world? To which I will reply, remembering the shape of the trees that danced along the borders of your home, your grandfather, whose smile was just as rare and comforting as the stark winter days, who will love you a little more gently. Your uncles who will cherish you semper aeternum and clothe you in belly laughs and pictures of your dad's half-maintained afro. The wars that tore down nations, tears that were barely supplied, and failures that were seasoned with mediocrity, followed by long nights in my lover's arms, thinking of the names we will call you, places we will show you, and all the odd joys unique to our little life. Oh, it's everything, I respond. You will make this beautiful. My name is Joseph Ambrosino. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Wisdom and Joseph. Can you imagine how much fun Joseph and I had working on his thesis? It's truly an honor working with students here at USF, and which I've been doing for 30 years. I just want to say that I don't typically speak at the Institute on Black Life Conference because for 12 years I planned these conferences. So I was too busy doing what Dr. Ponton is doing. But I wanted to talk today because I'm really excited about this topic, the topic of Black joy. And I think it's really important for us to embrace this idea, particularly in these horrific times in which we are living, in which we wonder if we're holding on. We're holding on by a thread, but I want to talk to you about why we should continue to embrace Black Joy. So I'm Cheryl Rodriguez, by the way, professor of Africana Studies and Anthropology here at USF, and my research and pedagogy are deeply influenced by Black feminist thought and the visual arts. Black feminism, or womanism, and just in case you don't know, explores the ways in which Black women's lives are affected by the intersection of gender, race, class, and other social forces. So intersectionality, that word that we're not supposed to, that we're forbidden to use, but I'm using it. Intersectionality provides an important conceptual framework for understanding what early feminists called the multi-layered textures of Black women's lives. Black feminism also champions the inherent value of all people whose lived experiences have been marginalized and ignored. So historically, Black feminist thought can be traced all the way back to the 1830s, when the activist and abolitionist Maria Stewart called on Black women to stand up and fight for their rights as women. So Black feminism is not a new concept. It's a very historic concept. So yes, this slide is very meaningful for me because, first of all, I'm an anthropologist, and anthropologists learn by doing field work, going to different sites. And one of the ways I've learned about Black artists is traveling to art galleries and museums all over the country and internationally to view their work. Black artists and their work contribute richly to my teaching. If you've ever taken one of my classes, you know that I use art very liberally to teach about all the different concepts that we learn in Africana Studies. And I feel like Black artists challenge us to think about the richness and complexity of the Black experience. So art provides multi-dimensional perspectives on the human condition, and I think it is really important for us to embrace art as a pedagogical tool. So let me go to the next one. Oh, I'm going, okay. All right, so the title of my presentation comes from this quote that is attributed to Sojourner Truth, who was an abolitionist and a women's rights activist. I don't really know for sure that Sojourner Truth said this, but it is something that the quote inspired me. Life is hard. Life is a hard battle anyway. If we laugh and sing a little as we fight the good fight of freedom, it makes it all go easier. I will not allow my life's light to be determined by the darkness around me. Really relevant today, right? Right. So this quote tells us that the fight for freedom and equality is eternal, but we must remember that we have the power to bring light into our lives. Okay, so this conference is entitled Black Joy. I want to thank the staff, the faculty and staff of the Institute for thinking of this, because it really is really an important concept. And today I want us to think a little deeper about what exactly is Black Joy. And in order for me to understand it, I look to the work of some Black feminist writers who actually write about Black Joy. Tracy Lewis Gidgets writes, Black Joy is powerful and all-encompassing and necessary. She writes, it's a strategy, a mechanism for resistance, a method of resilience, and a master plan for restoration. The radical demonstration of our humanity, that is Black Joy, our laughter, our ancestral mandate to keep moving in a rhythm all our own, set in a cultural context and struggle specific to our experiences as members of the African diaspora. Then Imani Perry, another brilliant Black feminist thinker, she says that Blackness itself is a joy. Blackness is an immense and defiant joy. Exhilaration in Black life is not to mute or minimize racism, but to shame racism, to damn it to hell. Do not misunderstand. This joy is not an absence of grief or rage or a distraction. It is insistence. Insistence. All right, so we are going to insist on our freedom. So where can we find resistance, restoration, and resilience? I'm going to look at a couple of Black feminist artists, visual artists, who I think represent these ideas that Imani Perry and Tracy Gidgets talks about. So one is Faith Ringgold, one of my favorite artists, whose work I have used extensively in my teaching. She is a self-proclaimed Black feminist and was and actually organized Black women artists in the early 1970s. She organized the Where We At Collective because Black artists, as you can imagine, especially Black women artists, even in the 1970s, were almost invisible. So she was one of the people who organized Black women artists. And this is her piece called the Sunflower Quilting Bee at Arles. And it is really, I could just talk about this, for the rest of the day, but I won't. Okay, but as you can see, she's honoring some of our most important Black women activists, Black women, Black sheroes, Madam C.J. Walker, Sojourner Truth, Ida B. Wells, Fannie Lou Hamer. You know who they are. You can name some of them. And she is showing them gathering together with creating a quilt. And the quilt is, first of all, that's a tradition, a tradition that Black women turn to for restoration, for joy, and also you might wonder why Vincent van Gogh is in the back there. Well, my best guess is that she is honoring him because a lot of the European artists didn't honor Black women. I don't think that's the whole story, but we're gonna leave it at that for today. We're gonna talk about the Black women. Okay, so Ringgold acknowledges the resilience of African American women and honors their traditions of resistance. And this gathering looks very restorative for these women. Another artist who looks at resilience and resistance in particular is another favorite, Elizabeth Catlett, homage to my young Black sisters. This is a life-size sculpture, as you can see, of a Black woman, and she is holding up her fist as a symbol of Black power. This is very typical of Elizabeth Catlett's work. Her work was very activist. She spoke to the issues, particularly that Black women faced in America. And I had to include a picture of young Black people surrounding her statue there. I saw this recently at the Brooklyn Museum of Art, and I don't remember being able to get that close to that. But anyway, so we see resistance, resilience, and these are critical components of Black joy. Another theme that comes from the writings of these Black feminist thinkers is the joy of family and community. They equate that with Black joy. And so this is one of our most important photography artists is Carrie Mae Weems. If you haven't seen her work, you should go. There actually was an exhibition at the Tampa Museum of Art, but she has a permanent exhibit, I think, at the Metropolitan Museum. But anyway, she is a tremendous artist who does work that kind of stands up to stereotypes about black family and people in black communities. So she created this entire series. There are many of these frames here, and she created these. It's called uh, the Kitchen Table series, 1990. And again, she's addressing the ways in which African Americans, particularly the ways in which black women have been portrayed by artists, by non-black artists, and she's also she's very unique in that she uses photography to express herself, and so this is another one of these that I think is important to associate with what we think of as Black joy. Okay, this is a young artist, Emily Manwaring, and I ran into this one at the Brooklyn Museum, and I knew that I needed to include her in this presentation. And she says, I use more of my present experience as a reference, and I think about how joy is shared with others, especially in black culture. So all of her work is celebratory. She uses vibrant colors. She is powerful and very, very fascinating. I was drawn to this by the color. That image is called, this piece is called She Wants to Move. And then here's another one, and it's called To the Rhythm. Again, a young, up-and-coming artist whose work is about community, whose work is about celebration, whose work is about joy. Okay, the next one is, let's see, what does that say? Resisting stereotypes. Thank you, radical joy, self-definition. I couldn't help but address that issue, radical joy and self-definition, resisting stereotypes. And there are two artists here, Kerry James Marshall and Lorna Simpson. Kerry James Marshall is a fascinating artist, and his work is extremely well known and is, I think, radical in that he takes a lot of risks with his work. One of the things he does is all of his black figures are painted onyx, which is an exaggeration of black skin, and he does that to bust up standards, what we think of as standards of beauty. He is once again someone who celebrates black culture, black history, and black joy through showing black people in community. And this is called School of Beauty, School of Culture. And again, if we had time, we could, look at this and pick it apart and talk about what we see in this barbershop, beauty shop. But the important thing is that, once again, someone who is addressing the pain of stereotypes against black people. How many? I have 1 minute? Okay. All right, well, anyway, that's Lorna Simpson. You can see these women enjoying themselves, celebrating their lives as women of the African diaspora. Finally, Black joy is powerful, defiant. Once again, I have a print by Faith Ringgold. If you've ever taken one of my classes, you saw this one because I use it to talk about a lot of different things. Most importantly, where's our place? Do we actually belong in a museum in France? Can we go there? Where do we belong? But this is another, aside from the fact that this is a joyful experience for these moms and daughters, it also asks a lot of questions about black artists. And finally, I love this one by Renee Cox. It's called Chillin' with Liberty. And you can see what's happening here. This is a black woman superhero, so she's Renee Cox is challenging that whole notion that only men can be superheroes. And then this superhero is sitting there on top of the Statue of Liberty, looking out across, looking out across New York City, and wondering like how she can bring some sense to to America. Okay. All right. Finally, I go back to Tracy Lewis Gidgets, who says she defines Black joy as the radical demonstration of our humanity, our laughter, our ancestral mandate to keep moving in a rhythm all our own. And this is a piece by Betty Saar, who's almost 100 years old now. But the point is that this piece is called Flight. And I want to encourage all of us to take flight. And with our imaginations, with our belief in ourselves, and with the knowledge of our humanity. And that is a major part of what we keep calling Black joy. Thank you.
So thank you so much to the panelists for those amazing talks. I think it's a great way to start a conference on Black joys to think about art, because art allows us the possibility to imagine worlds that don't currently exist. But we have always been recreating this world in our own image, and this has been a great encouragement to do that.